This is March 16th, 2022 implementation work group meeting for US National Grid. And the meeting schedule that I just whipped up is on the screen there. We'll do 5 minutes of administrative stuff. The recording's on, intros as needed, and call to order, motion to open, and approval of agenda. I want to spend 25 minutes talking about implementation of the US National Grid Institute. That's kind of the banner item here. I'll flip through some quick updates that I'm aware of and then open the floor for other folks to talk about stuff that they're tuned into. And then we'll keep 15 minutes towards the end here for open discussion. And then we can talk about potential dates going forward for 2022. We're trying to get the train back on the tracks, kind of derailed there for a little bit during 2021 for various reasons. But anyway, that is in fact what the game plan is, which leads me to intros as needed. Let me just check through here and see if we've got Cole Brown. I think I think you've joined us before, haven't you, Cole? Cole's out in Maryland with Maryland State Police, and I believe he is with us. And Dave Atkinson, I think you're a new guest. Could you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. Dave Atkinson. I'm actually the Assistant Director of Emergency Services in Placer County out in California. But I'm also in charge of our search management team out here for our volunteer search and rescue.
Very cool. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Hey, I'm back. Sorry about that. This is Cole Brown. I'm with Maryland State Police. I'm in our Special Operations Division. I'm also serve as the SAR coordinator for the state. And I work with several people in regard to the U.S. National Grid and the implementation of U.S. National Grid here in the state of Maryland.
And I think last but not least, I apologize for your name. I'm always name challenged. So I know you're with LA County as I remember it. So please. Yeah.
Oh, can you hear me this time?
We can.
Yeah, I could hear you the whole time. I had to log out, log back in. The name is Xenophon. I go by Yo. And
okay.
The last name is Geekus, unfortunately. I'm retired LA City, not LA County.
Oh, I apologize.
No
Yep.
No offense. I've been 2 years now retired, of course, COVID, but I spent almost 34 years with LA Fire. A lot of different things. One of them was an evangelist for US National Grid. Too long to go in, but glad to be here.
Thank you so much. And I've read several of your things. And you've obviously been engaged on the subject, as you've indicated, for a long period of time. Thank you. Okay, and with that, I think we're off, which takes us to the next bullet here. Call to order. If I could get a motion to open this meeting of the U.S. National Grid Implementation Work Group.
Also move it.
And do I have a second?
Cole Brown, second.
Thank you very much, Cole and Tom. Appreciate that. And with that, up for any changes, modifications, the agenda is presented. Are there any changes? Hearing none, we will proceed. Okay, I've whipped up some slides and let's ponder this. U.S. National Grid Institute Implementation Work Group discussion. So the leading thing that we went into sort of towards the tail end of 2020 and 2021, there's a lot of foot stomping about we need some sort of a formal organization which ramps up the legitimacy of people making the pitch and provides for a way to, if you will, enhance and move forward the effort related to U.S. National Grid. And out of those discussions, 9 bold individuals stepped forward to say, we'll help figure out how to do this. And for the better part of the first half, actually kind of bleeding into the third quarter of 2021, we were batting the ball around and came forward with the idea of officially standing up the U.S. National Grid Institute, which had kind of existed in non-existent status for a period of time, had just kind of been a mouthpiece kind of thing. So here's where we are. I just kind of wanted to walk through, and I know there's experts online here. I saw Jules check in, and I'm sure he can correct stuff if I've gone off the deep end here. But my understanding of what the past 2 decades have been that have brought us to this point in time is that in 2000, Tom Terry and Jules McNeff basically came to the conclusion that the application of the military grid reference system into the civilian sector would be a high value thing to have done for the purposes of the emergency services sector. And out of that effort, they basically founded the Public XY Mapping Project and did the corporate thing filing in Virginia, but they were never, if you will, took the step to be created as an IRS recognized entity. So effectively, they serve, if you will, as the holding bucket for the federal standard. And you can see that kind of as the next bullet down. The U.S. National Grid FGDC standard is published in the entity that brought that forward was the Public XY Mapping Project. 2005, kind of the next big step was Florida adopted the U.S. National Grid for the emergency services sector. Thereabouts in the year of 2007, and maybe a little bit earlier, again, the experts on the call have a better understanding of that, but Delta State received U.S. National Grid Outreach Grant from the USGS. And then in 2008, the Minnesota Geospatial Advisory Council Emergency Preparedness Committee, which I chair, and Share Geo, which I'm the executive director for, and then NABSIC started doing effective promotion through our channels. In 2009, Randy Knipple, who's on this call, really led the charge to see that USNG was adopted as an official geospatial standard in the state of Minnesota. And then 2010, in response here, Geo stood up the USNG Center, and the first ELMs were installed in Lake County, Minnesota, approximately 2011. And then kind of the genesis of where we are today is Al Studd, who is also on the call, led the charge with kind of bringing folks together during the Fire East in Daytona Beach, and brought folks together to try to create that first sort of annual U.S. National Grid Implementation Working Group meeting. And then the remaining bullets are 2015, we took the IWG online. 2018, we transitioned from annual to quarterly rather. And then 2020, as I indicated, the members of the IWG said, we got to do something more formal than what we're doing here, and spent the better part of 2021 working through the documents. And then effectively that last item that's on there, on across the span of March 1st through the 7th, documentation was signed that creates the USNGI as a fiscal sponsorship project of Share Geo. I'll explain that here in a minute. So that takes us to the mission that this esteemed group had determined would be kind of our charge going forward. Is as shown there on the screen, the U.S. National Grid Institute's mission is to promote awareness and use of the U.S. National Grid Standard as the nation's primary geolocation coordinate system and language of location for emergency response, data analysis, asset management, and public mapping is what the group settled in on. Within our formal documents that were signed out, the Articles of Incorporation and the bylaws, that concept is expanded upon, and I think puts it maybe more in more of a framework of something that most people can read and get their brain wrapped around. So the purpose of this corporation, and so you understand the idea of corporation, is corporations come in many forms and fashion, and within a filing, everything is referred to as a corporation. It doesn't mean we're a commercial entity. It just means we have filed as a structural entity that within state laws called a corporation, in contrast to a person. And so the purpose of this corporation is to promote emergency preparedness, emergency response, public safety, and other public benefits through awareness, understanding, and effective use of the U.S. National Grid Federal Geolocation Standard, facilitate use of the U.S. National Grid among units of government, non-governmental organization, institutions of learning, public corporations, and private enterprise for the common good, and provide technical expertise, research, facilities, education, and funding to encourage the use of the U.S. National Grid for public benefit. So that's carried both now in the bylaws and the articles of incorporation. So what's this fiscal sponsorship thingy? Effectively, what it is it's a way for nonprofits to, if you will, come into existence in training wheel form. You get an opportunity to try operating as a nonprofit, as kind of an entity that's got a plan and has functions and has an operational financial guidepost to move through, rather than just a bunch of people meeting online and saying, hey, we ought to do X, Y, or Z. Well, the idea here is to channel that and to do it in a way where there's no administrative burden on the entity when it comes out of the gate, but has that ability to function like a nonprofit, go out and collect donations, and the individuals who donate to the organization can write it off on their taxes. But we don't need to file with the IRS, because effectively Shared Geo acts as an umbrella. It's the entity that's overarching across the idea of the project. And several nonprofits have multiple projects going on at the same time. In this case, this will be Shared Geo's only fiscal sponsorship project. So effectively, the organization, from the financial perspective, is carried on Shared Geo's books. Donations are sent to Shared Geo, which in turn then passes through for the use of the project. And the IRS requires that a contractual agreement exists which defines the relationship. They don't want people just running off and saying, hey, I'm Joe Schmo's repair shop, and I'm a fiscal sponsorship entity of, whatever. And, so it's the IRS trying to ensure there's a level of governance in place, and the requirement that they have for any already federally recognized nonprofit to do this fiscal sponsorship arrangement is to have a contract in place which defines the relationship. So the flip side of the coin on this deal is what Shared Geo saw as being what they needed to have out of the group of people, the implementation working group, in order for them to expose their nonprofit status in a way that other people would have that coverage and operating potential. And so I clipped this out of the board resolution that was passed that basically says, for Shared Geo to accept the U.S. National Grid Institute as a fiscally sponsored project, here are the 4 things that we're going to expect you to do. First, that the project has elected at a minimum a 3-person board of directors to manage initial operations of the project. Second, that the project board of directors has assigned articles of incorporation, which is appropriate for filing incorporation in the state of Minnesota. that the project board of directors has a signed set of bylaws which are appropriate for managing the project as its own entity, and that Shared Geo and the project have in place a signed contract for fiscal sponsorship services. So those are the 4 hoops that needed to be jumped through. And again, the gauntlet that Shared Geo laid down was, if you're truly serious about doing this thing, then this is the minimum that we expect you to do, is right out of the gate, act like you are actually an operating entity. So that if you choose down the road to make the transition to being a nonprofit, or if whatever happens, you could actually, come out of the sponsorship arrangement in terms of, you make the decision you'd rather be a corporation, that's fine. But we want you at least to have governance in place before we're going to accept you. So that's the idea behind that. So what was done to position to make that happen? Project is elected at a minimum a 3-person board of directors to manage the initial operation of the project. So through that small leadership group that was meeting in 2021, I was elected as chair. Randy Knippel / Al Studd were elected to be the secretary, and it evolved towards Randy coming out of that process as being the secretary. And then BJ Colstead stepped forward to be the treasurer. So the next item is about the project board of directors has assigned articles of incorporation, which is appropriate for filing. Yes, we have that, and we have signatures on it, but it has not been filed with the state. We met the Shared Geo criteria by doing that. So we hold the paperwork. We have not filed with the state. So we have not incorporated yet with the state of Minnesota. The project board of directors has a signed set of bylaws. Same circumstance. They are in existence, but they have not been filed. And then finally, the Shared Geo project have in place a signed contract for fiscal sponsorship services. And the answer to that one would be yes. And the highlight items out of that contract in all of these documents will be readily available on the USNG website. I should say USNGI website when it comes online here in the next 60 days or so. 5% of the donations is the money that come in as a donation, or if we're lucky enough to figure out how to get a grant or whatever, 5% of that is held back to Shared Geo for administrative purposes. That's a very conservative approach that Shared Geo has taken. Most fiscal sponsorship arrangements have a minimum of 10% and can go as high as 25%. So Shared Geo, again, there's a little influence on who's doing the paperwork, but 5%, we have to effectively, for the contract to be effective, something has to be taken out. And Shared Geo believes that to cover administrative purposes, 5% would be fair. And then the next item is no politically slanted lobbying. That doesn't mean we can't, on behalf of implementation of US National Grid, try to buttonhole political individuals along the way. But we can't go out and say, we love the Republican Party or we love the Democrat Party because they're promoting US National Grid. As soon as it wanders into a political element specifically, that's verboten. Operations going forward. Okay, so the initial structure is a project without members. Again, as things evolve, and if there is a decision to move on to becoming a full nonprofit, at that point in time, there can be a decision made as to whether or not this group wants to, the Institute itself wants to have members, sell membership, whatever. But for the time being, to keep things very simple, those documents, the articles of incorporation and the bylaws, were drafted in a way where we were stood up without members. The next step is, or the next concept is that the U.S. National Grid Institute Officers Acting Board, so those are those three individuals I talked about previously, will invite the USNG implementation work leadership to a meeting to consider expanding the board. Potentially the ability for those 9 individuals that were in that original effort. We'll do a polling to see if they want to become members of the board of directors of the USNG Institute. The USNG Institute and USNG implementation working positions are reversed. Basically, the implementation working group created the USNGI. Now the working group becomes the operating arm of the Institute. And all documents have been created, and this is kind of the foot stomper through all of this. Why? Another reason why the things were worked through the way they were. All documents have been completed to create a self-standing nonprofit, except for simply filing the articles of incorporation, filing the bylaws, activating. There is a name reserved in the system of the Secretary of State of Minnesota, the U.S. National Grid Institute. It simply becomes a flip the switch to actually activate the name, requesting a tax ID number, and that takes less than 20 minutes. It's an online form you fill out and boom, you got it. And then completing and filing the IRS 1023 easy form. And to give you a sense of that, this was a real eye opener for me. When Shared Geo was created back in 2008, we had to file 65 pages of paperwork to get established as a nonprofit. The new approach, given the amount of money that this organization currently has in the bank and has the potential to raise, basically amounts to a 3-page form you can fill out standing on your head. It's incredibly easy now. I was stunned by what I saw. So effectively, to pull the trigger on becoming a nonprofit, if we try this training wheels thing and we like what we see, it'll take absolutely nothing to make it happen. So what other things have happened is trying to bring up the Institute? Well, the logos are above there, and that's what the leadership team approved for logos. A bank account has been established and BJ has visibility on it. There's $580.19 in it. There's a dedicated Zoom account paid through March 2023. There's a dedicated phone number. There's web hosting in place at HostGator. Emails with the usng.org trailer have been established already, and a MailChimp account has been created. And of course, everybody loves YouTube, and that beast is up and running also. So near-term administrative to flow from the board leadership meeting over by the next time we meet, the decisions will be made on board expansion, an election cycle. Basically, most nonprofit kind of arrangements recommend that you put people on a 3-year cycle. If you start everybody out on a 3-year cycle, then everybody turns at the same time. That's a bad plan. So we're going to need to come up with a way to think about that one. Determine a functional plan for how the Institute's going to operate, and then determine whether or not we do away with the implementation work group altogether, have subgroups, or they become committees of the Institute. And then finish development of the personal management and outreach plan. Right now, the USNG has 3 officers, which are in theory powered. This is a standard approach for doing business. Officers run the board decisions when the full board can't meet. The articles of incorporation and bylaws are written to allow up to 11 individuals to be on the USNGI board. Volunteers are willing to do work are considered to be members of the implementation work group, as it's currently named. And observers are those who want to attend meetings, but stay tuned in, but don't want to roll up their sleeves. Kind of the last thing we need to do here is professionalism of the images, correspondent, and similar. Think business cards as an example, what those need to look like. Near-term operational, the transition of the implementation workgroup website. It's in the old Google format, so at a minimum, it needs to come forward in sites, and depending on what we want to do about the implementation workgroup, it may disappear altogether. And I know that under construction thing on the actual USNGI.org URL has been sitting there for a long time, but we're going to make good things happen there. And then currently we've built a database that's got 197 contacts in it. This meeting only had an invite list of 44 individuals or 54 individuals. And we have the capability to dramatically expand the number of individuals that would be participating going forward. So we want to finish building that contact database. And then the last thing we want to do is finish decoupling US National Grid from the working group stuff from shared GeoIT services. Long-term, bring up social media development. Long-term, take over maintenance and management of the USNG Center. And that brings me down to questions and discussion. I know that was like drinking from a fire hose, but I wanted to try to make sure that we had a sound foundation on folks understanding what's happened as a result of a lot of the discussions that went on last year and what the plan is to make the thing functional going forward. And with that, I'll shut up. Who's got questions? Who's got comments?
This is Cole. Hey, what is the group for the YouTube that you showed? You went by so quick.
Yeah, there really isn't much there right now. And the model here is another group that I run. It's the Underground Utilities Mapping Project Team. And the idea will be, for instance, a recording from today that will be posted on this website under the meeting piece. And if we have presentations going forward, they'll be located here also. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's a bugger to find. I had to do some hoop jumping to find it because it's had so few hits on it that, you know, it doesn't pop. Okay, who else has got questions? Come on, Al, I know you're out there. You're waiting for me. You're like down in the grass somewhere. Okay, well, I guess
I got another one for you. So when you're talking about your board and everything else, and I know that you have a lot of us that have been like proponents helping, and I saw in your thing you have, USN working group, and you said bench and then observers. But those who are really trying to promote and continue doing this, have you thought about advisors to the board that are selected that show and demonstrate more than just sitting back and just taking the information and running with it, that they're contributing back to the organization, and put them as advisors? I mean, you take Tom Terry, for example, put him as advisor, or what's his name from Delta State University. There's certain ones, Talbot Brooks, and where those individuals are constantly promoting it, doing it. It's like, okay, they're advisors because they either have a good connection with something else, but they're advising the board on direction or just supporting, to where the observers are just taking the information and saying, hey, that's great, I'm glad that's happening, but they're not contributing.
Excellent point. In fact, most boards do have a group of advisors, and I'll bring that up when we meet after today. Thank you very much, Cole. Anything else? Going once.
I just have a comment. The logos look great. I know that was a lot of rigmarole but they look great when you see it on the page.
Okay, well, we did one thing right at least. Thanks, Georgiana. Appreciate it. Okay, so I'm going to fly through updates. Again, the amount of time that we've gone without meeting has limited my understanding of what's out there. So the only thing I can do is show you what we've been up to at Share Geo. And then at the end of that, folks can chime in with other stuff they've been up to. So here we go. So you're aware of it. The Share Geo booth has been, the virtual booth has been extensive. So www.sharegeo.org or sharegeobooth.org. That is kind of a mini U.S. National Grid center, the information center. And the center needs some serious work on upgrade. So maybe in the interim, you might want to think about taking a look at this. I'm not trying to promote Share Geo. I'm just saying it's kind of a nice little package. It includes several lectures that Randy did, one that BJ did, and then one that I did. So you can find that at that URL. Rob, are you on the call? I know you said you're going to show up, but anyway, so you're aware of it. The app is been in the process of rewrite, and we're literally down to the point of getting legal to sign off on it. It's over at Merchant and Gould, which is like one of the nation's premier IT, lawyer kind of thing. And what's changed on it? The license is going to be under info, and the current license that's in there is just the placeholder, and then it's got the lookup capability, and it's got ability to copy and paste as textually needed using the copy function. And if you want to give feedback on the thing, the update version that we're getting ready to release is the same URL, usngapp.org and /beta, if you want to go look at it. And then Jim Klassen at sharegeo.org, that's the guy doing the work on it. So if you see something you think ought to be fixed, shoot him a note. USNG Center Mapbook uploader. I just spoke to the developer last night, and we're 60 days out. She says she's come across a bunch of stuff on the way to clean this up.
Until further notice. Phase 2, all
who do we need to mute? Anyway, that's set up so that basically anybody from across the United States will be able to upload their map books, and they'll be available in one location. And Randy Knipple and Nicole have been working really hard to try to get this thing there, and it's coming. Long needed, the U.S. National Grid Emergency Location Marker Standards and Installation Guide is an extensive rewrite, and it's going to have everything you can think of that talks about ELMs. Like, believe it or not, all three of these colors of blue up here are acceptable by federal highway standards. It's called traffic control blue, and it depends on which printer it came out of. But anyway, and then those folks down in Georgia, they just can't help themselves. They're putting up U.S. National Grid everywhere. So this is an effort that's going on right now in Lake, I think Allatoona is how you would say it. And I guess we got somebody drawn here. But the point is that the Army Corps drained the reservoir, and what they've done with these markers, and the reason they did them like this is because they've had accidents out on the lake and nobody can communicate where they are. So they put these markers up. They're also putting U.S. National Grid on marine buoys, and it's a really kind of cool thing. And last but not least, if you want to show your U.S. National Grid spirit, we finally got this thing working again. So you can order your location and wear it on your chest, just like Mark Whitney. So with that, who else is out there? What do you got? Going once.
It is Al. Can you hear me?
We can, Al. What's up?
So that was my phase 2 white lightning warning for KSC. I didn't realize my mute was on, not on. Well, the only thing I got going is I'm teaching a class at New York State Technical Rescue Conference, June 4th and 5th. So I'll be doing the usual teaching fire rescue and actually SAR responders, National Grid, mentioning all the apps and doing my usual thing up there with fire rescue in upstate New York.
Okay, very cool. What dates are those again, Al?
June 4th and June 5th, I think. Yeah, June 4 and June 5.
And is there a fee?
Oh yeah, I mean it's probably only open to New York State fire technical rescue people. It's but it'd still be a website, and it's a New York State Fire Office of Fire Prevention and Control thing.
Okay. Hopefully we can start putting those sorts of things up on the website and advertising them, and maybe even pushing things like MailChimp to support them. Anyone else?
Fitzhenry here. We're going to be doing a practice exercise this weekend up by Brainerd on the Pillsbury Forest. And we're going to actually have our cadets using US National Grid to locate objects and items and that.
We love it. Train them early.
We're doing it. We're going to do a couple of classes during the year too. And our training center that's going to be up in Hutchinson, we're going to be building our hangar first, starting in May. And then the hangar will be done in sometime in November. We'll be doing drone training, ground team training, and a bunch of other SAR type training in there.
Cool. I've got a note here. Al, are you gonna answer it via the question is that the New York training, is it at the Riscony Training Center?
Yes, it is.
All right, there you go.
Who was asking that?
It's me, it's Liz DiGeronimo. Al, send me an email. That's right in our backyard. So about 15 minutes from my office.
All right, very good. Well, maybe we'll see you up there.
Yeah, sounds
Cool.
good.
All right. How we doing? Anybody else got anything?
Yeah, Steve, this is Jules. I just want to mention, first of all, how encouraged I am by all the work that you guys are doing. It's fabulous. And also, it's very encouraging to see new participants come in and expansion across the country of use of the grid. It's truly a coalition of the willing, absolutely, but very important. I wanted to mention that the next edition of the Federal Radio Navigation Plan is due to come out shortly. It still contains the section on the U.S. National Grid that highlights its use for the title of the section, Interoperable U.S. National Grid for Emergency Response Operation. That was signed by Secretary of Homeland Security last week. It's in for
Nice.
Secretary of Transportation signature now. And as soon as we have those two signatures, it'll go in for the SecDef signature, and then it'll be published. So USNG continues to, at least at the official federal level, as part of the Federal Radio Navigation Planning documentation, it continues to enjoy a presence there. So that's kind of important for support. But I'm really most encouraged by the things that everyone is doing at the state and local level. Happy to see Maryland coming on board as well. Wish we could get Virginia to to step up. Tom Terry and I have briefed folks in Loudoun County and Fairfax County at the political levels, and while they're interested, then there never seems to be the follow through you look for at into the fire and police departments. But at least Task Force One is a longtime user of the grid here in Virginia, and so we make progress where we can. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jules. And again, I want to reinforce the idea. Jules was the, if you will, the genesis, along with Tom Terry, for the creation of this effort from the very beginning. So we all owe a lot to Jules.
Well, I really want to give Tom the credit for that. He's really the driving force behind it, and a group of other guys, some of whom have passed. But yep, that was it was Tom's brainchild to start with.
So I'd like to point out, you'll see the XY here was done to honor those guys that made the initial effort. So when you see that in the seal, just be aware that's why it exists. And so there we go. Anything else from the floor on recent efforts? I saw there was, I think, Georgiana, I'm sorry. Did you want to add something relative to that note that you popped in?
Well, that came from Mike, but
Oh, I'm sorry.
well, Mike and me and another professor we're presenting at the National Hurricane Conference, and I'm not able to go, but Mike and Dr. Morgan are going to be presenting the high resolution population data that was instigated through OWL and the social vulnerability design. And I also want to give a shout out to Finis, because he was instrumental in all of that and getting all that together. But Mike will be doing the presentation and not me.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. That moves us on to open discussion, and you've already seen the pie throwing. So here we are. So this is a chance for anybody to say, well, what about X, Y, or Z? I mean, we didn't think much about that. So floor is open for anybody that wants to.
Joseph here. Am I coming through?
You are, Joseph. Go ahead.
Hey, cool. Heads up on some software that I am working on. Most people here know about a geo-referenced PDF file. I am working on geo-referenced JPEGs. So people will be able to use my GIS Surfer general purpose web map to display almost any GIS information you want. You will be able to take screenshots and move your screen up, down, left, right. The screenshots will exactly adjoin. You will get the geo-reference data for each screenshot, and you will then be able to use GeoJPEG software I'm working on to install those JPEG files in a special browser cache. You will then be able to view those JPEG maps offline via your browser, and guess what? Turn on the USNG grid. That's a teaser.
Well, I guess for our next meeting, we'll have to have you do a presentation so we can visually comprehend that.
Baby, the pressure's on now, man.
Yeah, you got to get it done fast.
I'll be in touch.
All right. Joseph is always a mad scientist, and I don't know why a guy with a nice hobby farm and the beautiful weather in Washington where he lives would be sitting in front of a computer. Anyway.
It rains all the time.
Okay. All right. Maybe it rains where you are. I don't know. Anybody else out there? Come on. It's wide open. You can talk about, your cat's doesn't like its cat food or whatever the case might be.
Steve, one question I had for you is there a place to store the historical documents that created the MGRS / into US National Grid that, talks about the delineation of the 100,000 designators, all the way through, and talking about how they developed that. Because a lot of times when I teach the US National Grid, I go back into teaching how does it relate to the US, to longitude or latitude and longitude, how it's formatted, how the grid's laid over top of a zone, and basically build it up. So it's getting back into the science of where did US National Grid come into play, and the correlation between feels that, well, we use that longitude and latitude. Well, this communicates directly with that, and just bridging the gaps. I just didn't know if there's a place to where we can store some of that data.
We basically have endless storage. It amounts to part of what in that litany of stuff that I said needed to get done, the decoupling of stuff that's at shared geo and what will be at either at the Institute or it's appropriate to put up on the USNG Center. So the other thing is structurally, in terms of the Google environment, we will be able to set up individual accounts like chair at usngi.org or research at usngi.org or whatever you'd like to do. And those documents, if I'm understanding what you're looking for correctly, could easily be stored within kind of a library or repository that would live in the Google storage environment. But I think maybe Jules might want to jump in here to expand on, make sure if there's historical items that Jules is aware of, Cole, that might be important to you. Here's an opportunity for him to kind of jump in.
Yeah, to the extent that derivation detail exists, I would imagine Tom Terry's got it, because he is the sort of the one who drew that line between MGRS and USNG, and I'm pretty sure he's written a couple papers on it. So if Steve, if you can connect me with Cole, and I'll try to connect him with Tom and see if we can't get that direct discussion underway.
And I've talked to Tom, and
okay.
sent me the 1941 document on MGRS and the development of it. But I just think what would be nice, while we still have Tom around, is how do we take something that was created in the 1941 timeframe and bring it into 2022, but not lose the legacy of how we got there. And I think I tried to tell that story through some of my presentations, but people have to realize is the further back you look, the further ahead that we can see. And Winston Churchill was really good about that. And I think that there's respect to those who spent a lot of time trying to figure out how do we map this world, and using Universal Transverse Mercator to get to where we are today. Because it's great that you put that sign up there, but people are like, well, what's those numbers and what did they mean? And it's like, well, let me explain to you. And then when they get done, they're like, okay, don't explain anymore. But there's respect for that. And that's all I'm saying is, I think that as the Institute, I think that we should show that historical aspect for those who are in science that want to understand it, that they come to us for that legacy information going forward.
Oh, that's an excellent point. I love the academic thing. I think this is a great mission for Florida State University to get a roll up their sleeves and help us with that one. I hear nothing.
Well, I just want to share that Mike has made some fantastic story maps through Esri that can take an odd topic and put it on one page with maps and et cetera and interactivity.
Ooh,
And
nice.
he's cornered the market on that. So I volunteer him.
And I mean, feel free if Mike wants to see what I've done to see how I've explained it. I'm more than welcome to share. But again, just as long as I get some credit for what I did. But, you know, again, it's just, I think there's a worth of that history.
I really think that's an important idea, that there is a reference library that holds the original documents in it, so that other academics or whatever can come along and, as you've illuminated here, trace the evolution so that they can understand, because that has been one of the issues that we've run into, is the academic world is not really heavily engaged in the USNG thing. And I think that would be a benefit. Okay. And Mike's responded, we can collaborate and put something together. So we can do the bubblegum version with the story maps, and then do the hardcore research piece as a storage profile of docs. We can do that. We'll plan that for bringing the site up.
Hey, I had one comment on that date that he said. I talked to Tom Terry and heard the whole story years ago myself, and he told me it was 47 and 49, not 41. If they did it in 41, they would have used it in World War II, and they didn't. So is that just an error, or is there something else that I didn't catch?
It may be an error. Now you're making me pull up my file.
Well, then I can tell you it's 47 and 49. So it came out as a post-World War II thing, a UTM 47. And then they obsoleted it in 49 and went to MGRS because it was too many numbers. And it's amazing today that hikers and people still use UTM when it was technically obsoleted 2 years later in 49. So that's the history. And then, of course, in 2000, USNG, same concept, 2001. But yeah, I tell that story all the time in a lot of my trainings. And I'm just amazed that, Canada, as an example, still uses UTM as their standard. And, people have issues with the unequal eastings and northings, and all that stuff was figured out by 49. And they went from UTM to MGRS, only 2 years later. Think about it. That's a pretty quick change. They realized they had a good thing, but it needed to be figured out a little better. So that's pretty much all from Tom Terry.
Okie doke. I think we are down to the point where, unless there are other comments from the floor, which the floor is open, we will move on to taking a look at potential dates for getting together in the future.
Attention all units, weather update, there's possibility of hail now to 1900 hours.
Got to mute that Al guy. There we go. Okay. So we're down to this block right here. The next implementation work group meeting, whatever it's going to be called. We have a potential, as was indicated on that contact list, of opening things up to 180 individuals are sitting on that list right now. So, you usually pick up about a third of what's there. So I want to try to move us back towards where we were originally, with a meeting in the first month of each quarter. And to transition there, I was thinking a meeting in middle June, late September, and then we would be back on schedule by January of 2023. Thoughts, comments on that idea? Does that look like something we want to do? Going once? Randy, look at your schedule.
Right now? Where?
Yeah. Yeah.
When?
Take a quick look.
When?
Right there. They're up there on the screen.
Oh, I'm sorry.
15 June, 28 September. BJ, you still with us?
I am still with you. They all work for me.
There you go.
Wednesdays are really good for me.
Okay. All right. So scroll them down. This is what we're gonna shoot for. June 15th, September 28th, and January 18th. And with that,
Hold that.
oh, I'm gonna be in the Boundary Waters.
Well, no, I'm not. That'll be okay for that. September 28. $2023.
Yeah, I was gonna retire like 10 years ago. Here, I'm still here. So
And
don't
by the
talk-
way, I didn't know that the last meeting was going to be going back 3 months. Oh, no. Okay. You have 2200. Okay. Yeah, you made it. It looked like a mistake up there.
Oh, it is a mistake right here.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was like looking at 22.
Oh.
I said, no.
that should be 2:00. Sorry about that, folks.
All right,
We good?
good.
All right, let's look at what we got last for chat. Nothing else here. Okay, that takes us over to the leadership meeting. Whoever wants to hang around, they can, with the exception of we got to close the first meeting. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Colstead.
Second, Fitzhenry.
All in favor?
Steve, aye.
Aye.
Yeah, I
We're
always-
supposed to.
I
Steve,
know, I always forget on Zoom. I'm supposed to do it the other way around. Is anybody opposed? Hearing none. We're out of here except for if you're part of the leadership team.